Doamnelor și domnilor, bună seara! Sunt Ludmila Barbă și vă invit la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Dimensiunea Diplomatică. Invitatul nostru de astăzi este domnul Simon Coveney, ministrul de Externe și al Apărării al Irlandei. Mr. Coveney, welcome to Moldova.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
18 years have passed since the last visit made by Irish Foreign Ministry to our country. What factors determined the change of priorities on the agenda of the Irish diplomatic service and brought the Republic of Moldova on the first page of your interest?
I'm very pleased to be here. I'm here for a number of reasons. First of all, to recognize now that Moldova has full candidate status in terms of joining the EU in the future. And I think that is a hugely important driver for change, not just in Moldova, but also the way in which the rest of the EU now sees Moldova in terms of a place to invest and a place to build partnerships, as a country that is now moving in the direction of EU membership. And I think that can be a very positive thing for Moldova, but also for many other countries that are currently in the EU. For my own country, 50 years ago, we had a referendum to make the decision to join what is now the EU. Those 5 decades have been completely transformative for my country. In terms of economic opportunity, political stability, but also quality of life issues, gender equality, workers' rights, environmental standards, protection of minorities, freedom of the media. All these things that come with EU membership have changed Ireland for the better. And they can do the same for other countries that want to join as well. And that's why Ireland is such a strong supporter of EU enlargement, not just for Moldova, but for Ukraine also, for Georgia in the future, for the Western Balkans. We see progress now with North Macedonia and Albania. And essentially what the European Union is, it's about the spreading of peace, security, and economic opportunity and stability. And they are things that I think can be hugely beneficial for Moldova. The second reason I'm here, of course, is to express solidarity with the pressures that Moldova currently faces in the context of the war in Ukraine. Russian aggression is driving millions of Ukrainians for their own safety out of Ukraine, and of course displacing over 7 million people within Ukraine. And this brutality is something that Europe hasn't seen for a very, very long time. And so Moldova, in many ways, is the most impacted by that in terms of displaced Ukrainians who have become refugees and the need to support them and look after them. And Ireland wants to help financially with the cost of that. So far, by the way, in Ireland, we have seen about 42,000 Ukrainians come to Ireland fleeing the war. But we know that the number is much higher here, and of course the population is smaller here, so it's having a bigger impact. We also know that there are real challenges in terms of energy security, in terms of inflation, the cost of food, the cost of energy, because of this war. And of course the risks to energy supply for Moldova in advance of next winter, should Russia decide to cut off gas supply. These are issues that the EU and Ireland wants to help Moldova to manage, to plan for, so that we can support this country that has been thrust into a very vulnerable situation because of Russia's war in Ukraine. And again, we're here to help, and I wanted to really understand how we might do that. And then the third issue is a really positive one. It's to talk about the Moldovan population in Ireland, which maybe a lot of people here don't know about it, but there's about 30,000 Moldovans living in Ireland today. They're a big part of our society, a big part of our economy. They make an extraordinarily positive contribution to Ireland. They're working in healthcare, in technology, in logistics, in hospitality, right across our economy. And so we want to try to build a closer bilateral relationship that allows people to travel easier, that allows things like recognition of driver's licenses, recognition of qualifications in terms of university qualifications and so on. We want to look at things like roaming charges for phones so that people don't have to spend as much in terms of talking to their families in Ireland. These are the kind of practical things that we're talking about today with your foreign minister, and of course we had the privilege of meeting your president as well, who's an amazing person, you know, who's trying to give the right leadership at a time of extraordinary pressure and human suffering. So that's why I'm here, and I can promise you it won't be another 19 years before an Irish foreign minister comes to formally visit Moldova again in the future. I think I've met your foreign minister 4 times in the last 12 months, maybe more even. So these visits, I hope, will become a much more regular.
The biggest part of Moldovan people understanding that this candidate states for EU accessions for Moldova is a big opportunity. But we know that Moldova has not yet met all the necessary conditions. How do you think, is it some risk for European prosperity, stability, or Moldova and the European Union can pass through this barrier?
Yeah, well look, there's always risk with enlargement, because if you're creating a bigger club, if you're inviting new countries in, then that creates challenges. You know, it changes the balance of power within the European Union. If you add more countries to the east, so, you know, if we add Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia in the future, North Macedonia, Albania, Serbia hopefully in the future, you know, and many others, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, you know, these are, I hope, this is the future of the European Union. Bigger, stronger, more stable, and countries that are neighbours who want to join and who are willing to make the changes and the sacrifices to meet the standards that are needed, then Ireland is a country that strongly supports that process. Does that have risk? Of course. But the European Union needs to be a live project that's growing, that's expanding, that creates opportunity, and of course manages the risk. And we can manage the risk. You know, Moldova is a small country in population terms, so is Ireland, by the way, but we're a little bit bigger than you are. And there's no reason why this journey to full accession can't be a successful one. It'll take time, and some of the reforms that are needed will be difficult politically, but you have a lot of partners and friends to help you do that. And trust me, because Ireland has done this, and we've been on this journey, trust me, the rewards at the end of it are very, very significant in terms of the kind of stability that EU membership brings, particularly for a country, of course, that has been so impacted by Russian influence in the past. You know, we believe that the European Union can be a very, very positive influence in the future, but that will involve change, and change always involves disruption, and that is sometimes difficult politically. But I think the formal status now of candidate status is the first big step, and we are, and many other EU countries are there now to help you make the other steps that will take a number of years. But I think, as I say, I think the reward at the end of that is a very significant one. The European Union is a protector of small countries, and I think that has been the Irish experience. That small countries matter. What small countries say matters in the EU. It's the strength of the argument rather than the strength of an economy or the strength of a military that actually decides the policy direction in the EU. And that, I think, can be a very positive and attractive thing for Moldova.
Mr. Coveney, Ireland has directed €1 million to Moldova to help us to manage the refugees crisis here. Maybe it is not very honest to put these questions, but the war in Ukraine is proving to be a long one. Would the government and Irish society to be able to offer additional aid to Moldova to face the refugees crisis?
Yes is the straight answer to that question. So, Ireland so far, in terms of the war in Ukraine, we have committed about €55 million in terms of support for Ukraine, in terms of military support. We so far have committed between 20 and 30 million euros in terms of humanitarian assistance. We have, of course, been very involved in the debate around sanctions, in terms of trying to bring this crazy war to an end. And of course, we are currently planning to spend about €2.5 billion in terms of supporting Ukrainian refugees in Ireland next year, in terms of healthcare and education and social welfare supports and housing and so on. So we're very committed to this effort. And of course, some of the humanitarian assistance that we've provided is specifically for Moldova, working with UN agencies here to support refugees and displaced people that are here, so that we can help your government and your people cope with that change. And we'd like to do more. One of the things that we've been talking to both your foreign minister and your president about is what Ireland can do to do more financially in terms of supporting Moldova through this very difficult period, and what we can do from a political perspective in terms of influence within the European Union to see how we can help on the energy security question, on preparing contingency plans should Odessa be attacked by Russia more aggressively, and if that drives another million Ukrainians towards the border of both Moldova and Romania. How do we cope with that? How do we respond to that in a way that's humane and appropriate? So yeah, we're having those discussions today, but there is an appetite in Ireland to do more financially. In times of real trouble in Ireland, we relied on the solidarity and support of some of our neighbours, and we're very conscious of the responsibility that we have now to try to do what we can to help your country.
Officially, diplomatic relations between Republic of Moldova and Ireland was established on 30 September 1999. Around 20 years later, our country opened the diplomatic mission in Dublin. How do you appreciate the role of Moldovan embassy in Ireland for the contribution, for the consolidations of relations, of cooperation between our two countries?
Moldovans like Ireland, and the proof of that is, of course, that there's about 30,000 of them have chosen to come to Ireland to live and work and raise a family. Many have married into Irish families. So we get on well together. But it's important that there is, of course, a state structure in Ireland, not only to look after the supports and the needs of the Moldovan community in Ireland, but also to build this bilateral relationship that I think can be much stronger in the future. We're two relatively small countries with a very different history. We're on other sides of the European Union. We're the furthest to the west, and you're you will be when you join, one of the furthest to the east. But I think we can bridge that distance through cooperation and friendship, and for that, having a diplomatic presence in Dublin is important. We have a very active honorary consul here, and of course our embassy in Bucharest is also busy here. But we need, and we will strengthen those diplomatic ties as well. But I think you will have seen today a lot of warmth, a lot of cooperation at a senior level between the two governments. And I think we can build on that in the future.
In the summer of 2021, when the COVID-19 pandemic was in full swing, the Irish authorities, despite some opposition, authorized the parliamentary election, Moldovan parliamentary election in Ireland. Yeah. Why did you go for this risk, and to what extent did the expectations regarding the good organizations in condition of pandemic correspond to the reality?
The reason why we took the risk is because you asked us to. Moldovans in Ireland wanted to vote in their elections. And so your government and your ambassador asked whether we would facilitate that, and we worked hard to do that, because holding elections in the middle of a pandemic when there were restrictions in place wasn't easy. But I think it was a good example of how the two countries can work together, and to accommodate. Democracy is important, and Moldovans in Ireland wanted to be part of Moldovan democracy. They wanted to vote, so I'm glad that it worked out, and we were able to facilitate that.
Starting with spring 2014, citizens of the Republic of Moldova, holders of biometric passports, can travel freely to the EU member states except Ireland. Where in your country we have a large community of Moldovans. In this context, could Ireland order the acceptance of liberalizations visa regime, or at least facilitations one? How about abolition of transit visa?
Yeah, so we're looking at this question. We had a discussion on it today. It's not that straightforward in Ireland, because even though we're a member of the EU, we're not a member of the Schengen area, and that's because Ireland has special arrangements with the United Kingdom, with Britain, in terms of a common travel area between Britain and Ireland. So we've always been slightly outside of the structure of Schengen within the EU, and that does create some challenges, because there's free movement between Britain and Ireland, even with Britain outside of the EU. So we are looking at this issue. We're looking, for example, as to whether it may be possible for somebody who gets a visa to travel to the UK to be able to come to Ireland automatically, or if you get a visa to Ireland, that you may be able to travel to the UK on that visa. We're also looking at maybe starting with a visa waiver for diplomatic passports, in terms of diplomats being able to travel without visa. So let's see what we can do in this area, but it's not as simple as simply removing a requirement for visas, because of the relationship we have with the UK, so I think that's understood, but we'll continue to work on it.
According to some estimates, the number of Moldovans temporarily or permanently settled in Ireland based on passport of other states, it's between 25 and 30,000 citizens. I think probably they could add the extra value to the country where they stay, to Ireland, if the Irish authority adopted the equivalence of study certification and driving license issued by competent institutions of the Republic of Moldova. In your opinion, would there be the possibility to advance in solving this problem?
Yeah, so I mean we're working on those things, and they involve communication back and forth between different government departments in Ireland and here. So in terms of higher level education, we're looking at ways in which Irish universities and universities here could potentially recognise each other's qualifications. On driver's licenses, we have a very different driver testing regime in Ireland to what you have here. So again, we've communicated in terms of what would be needed for us to be able to create a mutual recognition of driver's licenses. In relation to roaming charges, which I know is a cost that is frustrating for many Moldovans when they're calling family and friends. Again, that is something that we're working on with our Department of Communications. So yeah, all of these things are currently in discussion, I would say, and hopefully we can make some progress on them because, 25 to 30,000 people is a lot of people, actually, in Ireland. I mean, our population is only just over 5 million. So a population of 30,000 Moldovans in Ireland is a significant part of our society and our economy. So we do want to do everything we can to facilitate them.
The accession of the Republic of Moldova in the launch of the activity of several low-cost companies in our country, but not of island Ryanair. Could you hope that this company could expand its low-cost service in our country as well, and under what conditions?
The one thing I know for sure is that the Irish government doesn't control Ryanair. Ryanair is a phenomenon. They've changed air travel. They have a very dynamic management team. We know them very well because they're based in Ireland, of course, in terms of their headquarters. They are very active in terms of opening new routes. In Romania, for example, in Poland, for example, Ryanair really dominate a lot of routes to the eastern parts of the European Union and further afield. So I do think that Ryanair could create a very exciting connection for Moldova with the rest of the EU. I'll ask them about that, but I can't promise anything because that's not a government decision per se. It'll be Ryanair are very much a private company that make their own decisions, but they do listen to the government too, and it's something we can certainly raise with them. I think it could have quite a dramatic and positive impact in terms of options for travel across the continent of Europe for Moldovans, and of course potentially bring a lot of tourists here, which I think would be a very welcome addition in terms of the economy.
Unfortunately, the presence of Irish investors in Moldova is very low. What should the party, especially Moldova, to do for increasing their presence and the expand trade relations?
I think this is very much about building an environment for business that is reassuring for investors, and that means managing risk. It means understanding the relationship with the government and government agencies here. Creating a consistent platform in terms of taxation, in terms of government permitting and so on. So the challenge, I think, will be many Irish companies will look across the continent of Europe and decide where they're investing next year, and they will want to manage risk. They don't like uncertainty. Now, I think candidate status is a big help, because a lot of business interests will look at Moldova now differently. They will say this is a country that is moving towards the EU, is going to make the reforms that are needed for membership, and those reforms are the kind of changes that business will want and will demand. So I think there are real opportunities on the back of that. Of course, the security concerns because of what's happening in Ukraine, because of Russia, is a big problem in the short term. But I think if I was Moldova, I would be using the time while this war continues to rage to try to plan for how Moldova can provide that kind of certainty and stability in terms of business environment, so that when the war does end, when those security concerns are no longer as significant as they are today, that Moldova can maximize the benefit of potential new investment coming in, not just from Ireland, but from other EU countries too. And I think, this country does have significant advantages as well, in terms of its location, in terms of, some of the opportunities that are here, particularly around agri-food, technology, and so on. So I think there are opportunities there, and I think the road to accession to the EU will also bring with it more and more interest, more and more investment. And ironically, some of the most difficult reforms that you need to make are reforms that certainly business coming from the West will be demanding anyway. So there's a double benefit from that.
You had mentioned at the beginning of our interview, and I'm totally agree that Ireland has been an example of rapid development with the accession to the EU. From an ex-colonial economy, in just over 10 years since accession, it had become one of the most dynamic economics in Europe. Could Ireland be more actively involved in the process of transferring experience to Moldova? And in this context, do you think it would be appropriate to open a diplomatic mission in Chișinău? What could serve as a motivating factor in this regard?
I mean, interestingly, we opened a new embassy last year in Kyiv for all of those reasons. Of course, we didn't know there was going to be a war. Nobody knew that. But certainly we wanted to increase Ireland's diplomatic presence east of the European Union, so that we could be very much involved in the enlargement discussions and the ambition for the EU to grow. And that same rationale applies, of course, to Moldova too. So, some of the discussions we've had today reinforce in my mind that if Ireland can offer, shared experience with Moldova in terms of the reforms that are needed for EU membership, well, then we're very happy to do that in terms of support and mentoring, not just for a week or for a month or for a year, but for a longer period of time. If that's helpful in terms of institutional partnership to help you make the kind of reforms and changes that are needed. And we know what they are. And they're not easy, but they do have significant rewards when it's done. Not just to join the EU, but actually in terms of functioning democracy. So yeah, we want to be part of that journey with you, if you choose it. I mean, I think that there are many friends now in the EU from Moldova. Obviously Romania, which is very close. And I was in Romania yesterday, and believe me, they are very strong advocates for Moldova. But there are other countries like Ireland that are a bit further away, but have a different kind of experience of the EU. Certainly that shared experience is on offer if it's wanted here.
Mr. Coveney, thank you very much for your time, for this interview, very useful for me and I think for our televiewers, for the citizens in Moldova. I would like to wish to Ireland, to the Irish people, the peace and prosperity.
Thank you too, and can I wish you and all of your viewers wish you well for the future, because it's in the short term it's going to be challenging. We know that. It's not your fault, but what's happening next door in Ukraine is putting huge pressures on Moldova. But you have many friends, and I hope we'll be able to help get through those challenges and out the other side. And most importantly, that we can help you look ahead to a very bright future as part of the European Union. It's a very exciting journey, trust me. Ireland's experience has been so positive, and you can make those changes too.
Stimați telespectatori, aici ediția noastră de astăzi s-a încheiat. Vă mulțumim pentru atenția cu care ne-ați urmărit și vă urăm toate bune!